Cornerstone, the Song of Tyrim, describes itself on its Kickstarter page as Wind Waker meets Dark Souls. That's a lofty goal, but an intriguing one. Can you combine the exploration and colorful style of Zelda's ocean adventure with Dark Souls' brutal yet satisfying combat? That's what I'm here to answer, but before I begin, this key was obtained from the publisher for review purposes. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? So let's set the stage here. The next clip does a very good job of summing up my thoughts about the Song of Tyrim in a nutshell. Yep. Look, it's a small indie game that raised $31,448 on Kickstarter, and it comes out to Steam, GOG, and the Humble Store on April 26, 2016 for $19.99. To put the Kickstarter into perspective, Bear Simulator raised $100,571. A little bit of a difference there. And I don't like being the guy who rips apart an indie game that has passion put into it, and I believe Cornerstone has that passion behind it. But the Kickstarter page makes one major misstep immediately. It compares itself to two established franchises. While it later says that it was influenced by them, that statement sets up expectations for the player, and those expectations immediately fall flat on their face. And despite wanting games like this to succeed, I'm a critic first and foremost, and serve the consumer. And boy, does Cornerstone have some things to criticize. Let's start with the story. You are Tyrim, a young Viking who really doesn't like the whole adventure thing. You'd rather stay home and make a store and stimulate the local economy. But when the majority of the village's men don't come back from an expedition, one of whom is your father, it's up to you to figure out what's going on. So get ready to set sail and explore the world, looking for clues for their whereabouts and having some fun along the way. But let's dig into the writing here. There's an interesting folklore that's alluded to here, and the universe seems like something that really could be interesting. The base concept of a reluctant hero going on an adventure and going on a journey of discovery has been done before, and it's a reasonable formula to work off of. Tyrim does have a bit of a spark to him, as he's a bit of a smartass at times. It's clear he's not exactly happy that this burden has been put on him, but he will figure out what's going on. But one of the major problems is that this world feels so dead. Characters interact with you at a bare minimum, and the dialogue really could have used some voice acting or more sound to really sell the delivery, because the dialogue itself isn't that interesting most of the time. I know that this was a Kickstarter stretch goal in terms of the voice acting, but I feel that it almost required it due to the writing being so bland, and grunts and groans or mumbling could have gone a long way to sell this plot. This isn't helped when an NPC is done with you in terms of their contribution to quests and the story. They won't react to you anymore, like you don't exist. That hurts the immersion along the way, and makes the world just filled with quest givers rather than actual human beings. The game does its best to fill the gaps with humor, and part of that issue is that this humor in particular seems to be very reliant on out-of-this-world jokes. What I mean by that is, the jokes are reliant on concepts or references outside the bound of the game, and if you don't understand what they are talking about, well, you're not going to get it. Take this joke for instance. I'm not sure what they're referring to, and all it caused me was confusion and me feeling, well, dumb. The biggest problem though is the lack of wrap-up on plot points, in particular with the islands themselves. Sure, helping out the local people to overthrow the now tyrannical mayor is one thing, but you know what happens when you actually beat the boss to get the item you need from that island? You're plopped back at the start of the island, with no conclusion of what happened. What happened to the story? Did the people regain their power? Is there any conclusion? How did Julong clone himself? Oh, that may not be part of the story it's trying to tell, but you see how he's sleeping here? And while he's still sleeping, I go up to take this bell, and wait, what? How? Are you an astral projection? Are you the real Julong? What are you? But okay, storytelling, the game's got some flaws. But what about the gameplay? Well, I wish I could say it fared a lot better, but it does have a strength or two embedded in its overall package. This is where the Zelda formula is the most apparent, as the combination of exploration and combat come together in the dungeons that you'll have to traverse to find the items you need to move on in the world. So the first thing you'll do is make your way to an island, where the local people will need you to do a couple of tasks for them that are usually directly related to you getting into the dungeon. They vary from turning on a windmill so that they can make food, to helping the island pass along secret messages. This segment usually requires some platforming and some detective work. You'll run around trying to use the clues you have to complete your task, and it does feel Zelda-like in that sense. The controls are reasonable for the most part, with both the keyboard and the controller. In terms of controlling Tyrim, you'll feel like you have the tools you need to move from place to place without a lot of problems. I specifically mention Tyrim as it's the level interaction that will feel off at times. Sometimes when trying to push a specific object or aim for a specific ledge, it feels like the collision detection is a tiny bit off, or something about the physics is misleading. Not sure how to describe it beyond that, but it's nothing that will take away from the experience in the overall picture. Dungeons are pretty much like Zelda dungeons. Get through the rooms, find an item you may need to move on, etc, etc. Probably the strongest element of the gameplay is the puzzle-solving elements, where you have to use the environment and what little information you have to figure out how to get through the area. You will face traps, and you will run into enemies, and you'll have to deal with each of them in kind. None of them will be a really big challenge in the end, but they will give you a hiccup or two in terms of your progress. What the bigger problem here is getting lost. See, the game's maps aren't very detailed, and the game fully expects you to figure things out on your own. Rarely does the game give you a hint, and sometimes you have to try random things in order to hopefully keep on moving. This will cause some problems with players with low frustration tolerances, as there were times that even I was getting to the point wondering what the hell the game wanted me to do. For some, however, this will be exactly what kind of game that they will want. But I'm really not kidding on the whole game not helping you thing. Look, I get it, you're on your own adventure and all, and it's the journey that you partake on. Self-discovery, figuring yourself out, etc, etc. You know what's not fun? Getting eaten by a shark randomly. Oh, I apparently sailed into unknown territory. Apparently I got eaten by a shark if I do that. Lovely. There are also optional side quests that will get you new crafting recipes, for example, but more on those later. But I need to point out that they don't necessarily all work. Let me point out this quest that you get regarding fish tacos. Yes, fish tacos. This guy wants fish tacos. Okay, a weird request, but fine. I find the guy in the dungeon regarding this specific fish tacos recipe. He wanted me to bring him mutton, and he gave me the cookbook for the fish tacos. I bring it back to the original guy. Wait, what? Apparently that's not what you want? But that's literally the description. Did you bug out? And yeah, I mentioned there was a crafting system. Because it's a game in 2016, of course it has a crafting system. But you craft more than potions or one-use items. You craft your weapons, your utility items as well. And of course there's item degradation. And oh boy, this is going to drive you insane. But hey, you can make turrets, and who doesn't love to make turrets? I've actually only got minor beefs with the weapons breaking on you. Part of it is the fact that you can't keep multiple weapons on you at one time, and that crafting doesn't pause combat. Yes, it can make things interesting if your weapon breaks in the middle of fighting someone, as you run around either hoping to get far enough away to craft a new weapon, or start throwing everything you can find left and right at them. That's why it's only minor. In that chaos, the game becomes a little bit more interesting. On the other hand, it can be really frustrating, especially if you don't have the components for a needed item, like a shield, for example. Now, in some cases, this can make things interesting, as you try to find the right components to make a necessary bandage to heal yourself. But I really have to question why items used to get around the environment also have a shelf life on them. This one particular section where you have to craft rocket boots to get through the area, make one mistake and you've got to try it again and craft another set. Oh, and I really hope you have the resources on hand or available in the general area, because if they aren't, be ready to mindlessly wander around the map in frustration as you try to find more cotton that you need. Or did I mention there was a limit resource as well? And if you didn't find the upgrades for them, they may take 40% of your inventory to make one item? Did I mention that the upgrades to hold more items look exactly like the regular items at times, so you might have missed them? Granted, they may be out of the way most of the time, but why do this? This is just adding frustration for the player. Now, beyond the exploration and the dungeons, the game will throw some different elements at you, like sand racing for example. And while the controls for this portion are slippery as hell and could be implemented a lot better than it was, I at least enjoyed it for what it was. And there was something to the goofy implementation here. The chaos in moving actually made it a bit more fun. Yeah, it was fun because it was wonky. Okay, what does the Kickstarter say about combat? The Kickstarter page says, the combat will be challenging and discourages button mashing. All different enemy types have unique behavior. It's your job as the player to discover and exploit the patterns in their behavior. So I wonder how accurate that is given the combat in the game. It claims to discourage button mashing, but to call the combat challenging in any shape or form is stretching things. Here's how you do it in fact. Swing at the enemy. If they get hit, swing again. If they defend it, back up and let them swing. Then hit them. That's it. That's the strategy for pretty much the entire game, including bosses. Enemy variety really doesn't help that. To say the combat is boring would be an understatement. You are hopeful at first when you're getting the Zelda-like targeting system and a good sword and shield to work with. The first swings give you that hope that okay, it works functionally. Now let's see what they can do with it. But they never do anything with it. The stamina meter only becomes a hindrance to the gameplay, not really adding to the combat. And what gets more frustrating here is the descriptions that you read on the Kickstarter page. Enemies can take advantage of their surroundings as well. They can throw objects, tear down structures, and surround you. About that. The AI is not only simplistic in this game, it's downright stupid at times. I mean, they guard and defend, but that's basically the extent of their logic. And even then, it's easily exploitable. Now look, the Zelda games weren't necessarily the pinnacle of combat, but this is simplifying it even more. And to compare it to Dark Souls of all things, this combat? Boss fights are a tiny bit better, as they usually added an additional mechanic, such as trying to burn this boss with the oil that he's left on the field. But it's not by much, because the basic AI turns into the back up and smack it again formula. But you know what's weird? There's a stealth and noise detection system in the game, and it somewhat works. Now granted, I'm not a fan of stealth mechanics usually, but the game does a good job of letting you sneak up on an enemy to get the first hit, or having parrot alarms alert enemies to your position. I wonder why this didn't become a main part of the combat or the focus be put on this, because this is a lot more fun than the combat. Visually, the game is rough around the edges. You do get some pop-in here and there, and then you get some... I'm not even sure what this effect is. It's unique though. The game can look pretty good at times, in particular on the water. It just sucks that it doesn't complement the water with more... life? The game also has some performance issues, and my specs are in the description below. Basically, I could see some pretty reasonable frame drops in both battle and in exploration while playing the game. You'd see 10 to 15 FPS drops at times during battle, which is pretty significant. There's lighting issues as well. In particular, you can see it with the day and night cycle. The daytime seems to be fine light-wise, but when it goes to the dark, well, just look. Some of the places are ridiculously dark, and frankly, I can't see shit. It needed a bit more balance in this department, and because of that, it's sometimes really hard to see exactly what you need to find in the environment. Now you're probably wondering, why isn't this a full video review? Why is it only a first impressions? Well, I didn't beat the game. I got tired of putting up with the game's flaws that impeded my progress. The game has bugs, let me make that perfectly clear. Bosses despawned on me. There were times that checkpoints that I had seemingly activated actually weren't, so I had to backtrack a ton. There were some bad load times as well, in particular when on the sea and getting to a new island, as you can see here. And then there were things like this. Oh, by the way, I couldn't fast travel from there either. Yay for swimming. Look, if I haven't made it clear by now, I'm not a fan of Cornerstone, the Song of Tyrim. Even the game's strengths have major issues deeply embedded in them. There's several game design flaws that hit the entire review spectrum. And frankly, no element does well enough for me to give a recommendation. I think there's too many issues at the core of the game, and the game needs a lot more QA at this point in its life. The best group it works for is younger kids who like the idea of exploring, but I think there are games more suited towards that goal. The Viking-like background is interesting, but never really becomes a main focal point. And frankly, the treasure that I was hoping to find within this game was just a myth. So sadly, that makes me a pirate sailing the 7 seas, still looking for that next Zelda and Dark Souls adventure. Thanks for watching. Like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe if you want more content like this. In the description below, you'll find the Steam review accompanying this vid, along with social media that you can follow me on, Twitter, Google+, and Facebook groups. And if you want to support the channel, click that Patreon on the left of the screen. And remember, keep on gaming.